the cost of rent, and is it ruining your life? It's an enormous topic right now with the new Renters' Rights Bill for England moving through the Houses of Parliament. And Ben, what's going on with that? What's the state of play?
Well, we're quite far down the process now, so we're hoping, and the government's hoping itself, that it will pass this new law by summer. What it's going to do is end Section 21 no-fault evictions, which is when a tenant can be kicked out of their home for no reason and with just 2 months' notice. So that's really good news for renters. What it doesn't do enough of, which we're going to talk about today, is the cost of renting, which is the number one concern for renters at the moment.
Yes, let's talk to Owen, actually, who joins us. Owen, you've been renting in London since 2018. What's been going on with your rent? Because it's not a pretty story, this one, is it?
It's definitely not a pretty one, that's for sure. I've had to move like 8 times over the past 6 years just to chase slightly cheaper rent, which is insane. You know, not to mention like the mental impact that has. Like, never really felt settled in a home just because every year my landlord's like, right, the rent's going up. And I'm like, okay, I have to leave now. I have to go to a different area. I have to travel further to work, which is really, really tough.
And is it true that in the last 6 years, your rent has tripled? Do you mind telling us what it was and what it is now, just so we get some idea of what you're having to pay?
Yeah, so I first moved to London in 2018 and my rent was about £650. My rent now is way over £1,850, and that's before you've even put any bills on top of that.
God, that seems absolutely astronomical. And I'm imagining for that you're renting a huge palace with a servant's wing and a swimming pool. What are you actually getting for that money?
Yeah, so that's actually sharing a flat with a friend. That's a 2-bedroom flat, which, yeah, is absolutely crazy. Don't even have like my own space for that price.
Yeah.
You know, it's recommended that you spend 30% of your gross salary on rent, but the average household in London is spending 72% of their income on rent, which is a crazy stat.
It is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, is there anything you can say apart from, oh dear, this is awful? Because that's what I feel like saying. This is just completely awful.
It is absolutely awful. And these rents are rising simply because they can. There's nothing stopping landlords from putting the rent up. The average amount of rent rise, there's obviously been a really serious example of something tripling in this case, but the average rent rise has been about £3,000 in the last 3 years. So that's each year. It's not just finding a tenner behind the sofa to pay for a rent rise. It's so much more money, £270 every month. So for renters that are facing that, there's some things that they can do, but we're not in a good negotiating position. So we're trying to convince government that they need to put a cap, a limit on these rent rises.
What can they do at the moment?
So for renters at the moment, we'd say if you do receive a rent rise, make sure that you take a bit of time to think about your position. You don't have to respond straight away. In fact, if you start paying the new amount of rent, it can be in the law considered that you've accepted the rent rise. What you should do is have a look at the amount that rents are being charged elsewhere for similar types of properties. That might help you negotiate. And if you've been a good tenant, your best bargaining chip, I know it feels scary, is sometimes to say that you'll have to leave if this rent rise happens. And then the landlord might prefer to keep you on because they don't want the risk and uncertainty of bringing someone else in.
I mean, the difficult thing, of course, Nicki, is that if you're a landlord, you're not part of social housing. You can just say, well, you know, OK, I'll stop being a landlord then and take my property off the market. I'll sell it and I'll move on. You know, the idea that landlords don't want a ceiling or a cap on the rent, do they?
Yeah, and also £1,800. I mean, that is a fortune every single month. But I know in so many cities and towns around the UK, there's a lack of properties. So, OK, you go and I'll get somebody else in that's prepared to pay it.
Owen, thank you very much indeed. I can't even believe what you've been through. That's absolutely amazing,
Awful.
tripling in 3 years. Thank you so much for talking to us about it. Very, very difficult situation. I totally appreciate it. And also this precariousness where you just don't know if you're going to be... But this should be ended now by the Renters' Rights Bill.
So part of it is being addressed. So the idea that you would be able to challenge at a tribunal, again, something that's not very accessible to many people, but you can challenge a rent rise. That already exists. And the bill is going to change things to make it slightly better in that the tribunal won't make your rent go up even higher than what the landlord has asked for, which it can do at the moment, which is a big problem. But there's no obvious cap, there's no obvious limit. And especially when landlords are advertising new homes, they can basically name their price.
All right, let's go to Tina on the line in Hertfordshire. Hi, Tina.
Hi.
So this is about your daughter. She's paying a fortune, I believe, to rent.
She is, and it's actually a council sort of housing association house as well.
Right.
But because it was a new build, it started off quite high. It's a 1-bedroom flat. It's got the kitchen and living room together. But she's basically paying more than I pay for my 3-bedroom home every month. So she's really struggling. And when she contacted the people, because obviously they say if you're struggling, phone for help, they actually just said to her, have you looked on Home Swapper, so that she could swap? But she can't because the rent's so high, nobody wants it. So she's really struggling with her finances, and because she lives alone, you know, everything falls on her. And I help top up her shopping every week. She takes me shopping and I buy her the essential bits. She hates it, but I do it.
Is she beginning to feel that she will have to give up that flat if the rent doesn't come
Yes, I
back?
mean, she's already said, you know, like I may have to come home. She's 38. She doesn't want to have to come home.
That was
No,
my
she's
next.
got
That
her
was my
little
next
phone.
question. I was going to say, how old is she? And you've already told me 38.
How can you ever save when you're paying so much in rent? That's the thing, because not everybody wants to rent the whole time, do they?
No.
A lot of people do want to, you know, get a little pot together, get a deposit, but you're paying that sort of money. When are you ever going to be able to do that?
No, and I don't know what you can say that's constructive in this situation.
It's really, really difficult because most people don't want to be renting. We're trapped in renting. We should be able to own our own home if we can make those savings, but it's like pushing a boulder up the hill that keeps getting steeper and steeper because of these rent rises. So that's why we want people to join our movement at Generation Rent. We're trying to get the government to listen. There's things that the government already does to limit costs for people. So, for example, your energy bills or your water bills in your home, there's a cap on those. But if you're going to lose your home anyway, that cap's useless. So we need to make sure that there's a cap on the actual housing because it's so fundamental to people's lives.
Well, I'm very pleased to say that a landlord has rung in, so that's great. Yvonne in Falkirk, thank you very much for calling. So what's your perspective on this? Because you see that Owen, you know, his rent's tripled and our other young lady who's 38 may have to give up her flat because it's just so expensive to pay the rent. What's your perspective as a landlord, Yvonne?
Well, Vanessa, I've got two properties. Both of them have a rent of £600 a month.
Right.
The rent hasn't gone up since 2017 because I wasn't aware that I could put the rent up. The Scottish Government have now put a cap of 3% on landlords raising the rents, which means I can raise the rents by £17 a month. And that's ruining my life because I can't sell the properties.
Why not? Because the property market's not buoyant at the moment. Is that why?
Well, I wouldn't make people homeless.
Oh, you don't want to sell them because you don't want to turf them out. But you mean you need them to yield you more rent? Is that what you're saying? You're not earning enough from the rent?
No, because that's my only income.
Right, okay. So in other words, it's not true that all landlords are fat cats living off the cream of other people's earnings.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do, Yvonne? What will you do?
Well, if they decide to move on, then at that point, I would think about selling them.
Right. And so this isn't how you imagined your life would be as a landlord. You hadn't thought it would turn out like this.
No.
Right. And
Definitely not. And
this
I
is
gave
obviously
up.
it's a different situation in Scotland from the rest of the UK. I'm not sure what it's like in Northern Ireland, but so in Scotland there's a cap. In England there isn't.
That's right.
You would like to see one. But then when you hear a landlord like Yvonne saying, well, it just isn't making financial sense for me like this.
I think that the difficulty around the situation where you're choosing to sell or not is that tenants don't have to become homeless in that situation. You could sell to another landlord. If the tenants were in a position to be able to offer to buy, then maybe it would be worth offering the home to those tenants in the first place. But the cap in general, it's not a rent freeze. It's not saying that you can't earn any more money off that property. It's been 3%. Over the last year, it went up to 12% for certain properties. And now that cap doesn't exist anymore as well. So we're really hoping that landlords, if they're good landlords like Yvonne says she is, then hopefully they won't be going through the roof because the cost of living facing tenants has been brutal. And the number of children living in temporary accommodation because of the cost of renting, the number of people forced into debt and poverty and homelessness has been absolutely shocking. So we'd appreciate if more landlords were trying to do the right thing there. But having a cap that's just common sense to stop renters being priced out of their homes and out of their communities does seem like a sensible step forward.
And the idea of, depicting landlords and painting them as these horrible sort of racketeers, exploiting tenants. I don't know what percentage of landlords are like that. I realise there are still landlords like that, and I know that there are really unprincipled landlords, for example, with tenants in their sheds, that kind of thing, beds in sheds. It's a big thing in London. It's also over the rest of the country. So there are some real evil people out there. But in general, they seem that they're more like our caller Yvonne, who's just trying to make a living and, you know, be a decent person.
Yeah, I mean, we hear real horror stories of, you know, some of the ways in which people are forced into overcrowded conditions. They're not having, you know, the essentials fixed. They're in unsafe places that are making them sick. But also there's many landlords who have a good relationship with their tenant, who do abide by their duties as landlords as well.
And actually, I've got another one on the line, Rachel in Devon. Hello, Rachel. Thanks for ringing. What's the story with you and your tenants?
Hello, everyone, and nice to speak to you all. So, I've got a lovely family that has been renting from me for some years. The mortgage came off the fixed rate, went up over £500 a month when I remortgaged.
Rachel's mortgage.
I haven't put their rent up. Currently, there is only £90 a month left available to me to comply to what I need to, insurance and so on. There is no budget left for any kind of maintenance. I just wanted to phone and give a balanced view. You know, there are greedy landlords, I accept that. Yeah. However, I'm going to have to go and speak to a family who I'm actually very fond of to ask if they can partake in the increase, or they'll have to find somewhere else to live, because there is no point me not putting the property on the market. And that is where lots of people find themselves. And all that does is shrink the rental market, which will inevitably increase rents.
Absolutely. So I'm assuming you hadn't envisaged it was going to go this way, Rachel.
I never thought it would go up as much as it did.
No.
I think anyone did they? No.
No. Thank you, Rachel, very much indeed. And thanks to everybody who called about this. I mean, it's very difficult. And I think, you know, people of a certain generation like ours, Nicki, we just don't appreciate how good we had it, do we?
I think we are the last generation that could afford to buy on their own without mum and dad sort of chipping in.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know shared ownership has really helped, you know, where you can rent and you can buy parts as well. And that's a balance. But there's a lot of people that can't do that.